It's a beautiful kind of gray morning. Your wife brought us some donuts.
Yeah, Bank Smith the night again.
And we have a very cool guest in the studio.
Yeah, great. Right now, we are sitting down with the head of the Libertarian Party here in Georgia, Ryan Graham. Welcome to the Rebellion, sir.
Thanks for having me.
We are glad to have you here. We've got. I'm sure we'll talk about anything and everything under the sun with regards to all the parties and what's going on in the world of the LP right now. But we've got a pretty big day. You've got a morning ahead of you as well after this, correct?
Yeah. We're the Libertarian Party of Atlanta has an ongoing monthly event where we go and clean up a park. Basically,
You terrible people.
Practice what you preach. We believe
right.
in voluntarism, right? We want to go up and clean it up. We don't want to force anybody to pay to clean up that park, so we go do it ourselves.
What park is it you guys are going to?
Phoenix 2 Park. Full disclosure, we picked one very close to our house, so
Yeah.
if no one shows up, me and my wife can do it.
Yeah, well, no, I mean that's smart. Have you guys been doing just a bunch of different parks over the course of time, or no? Or is
No, we tried to adopt a road because we thought that would be really funny, right?
Yeah.
Like, who will build the roads? And like, well, we take care of the roads voluntarily, right? Here's an example of one way that we can do this. But the funny thing is the government agency in charge of doing all that is very non-responsive.
So, in terms of they won't let you kind of adopt a road, is that the hang up there?
I imagine they'd let me if they responded.
Holy
That's
cow.
really interesting. So my church adopted a road, and there was back in I think a few decades ago, the ACLU sued on behalf of the KKK to allow them to adopt a road. Not in Georgia, I don't think, but the LP.
Yeah.
You guys are just a little too radical, I think.
Must be.
That's funny. Cool thing is behind Shane's house, there's a road that is privately paid for.
Yeah, I mean, they're all over the place. That's when people say, like, what about my roads? I'm like, have you been on a private road? They're amazing. Have you been on a public road where our infrastructure is failing across? Is this the example you really want to use?
Right. Yeah, and that always boggles my mind, right? I mean, you have to pay all this money for your car to be inspected, to be roadworthy, and then you drive across these roads, and unless you've got like a really nice, four-wheel drive type truck, your car is probably just taking an absolute beating from these substandard roads.
Yeah. And I live in the city of Atlanta. It's even worse.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. I know, like, when I'm going down 400 towards Atlanta, there are some real awful stretches. It's like right when you kind of hit that Buckhead area and you're headed south on 400, it's like the pavement's disintegrated. All this money that we're supposed to spend on more roads out there, and you're just like, what on earth?
Maybe it's conspiracy. You've got the tire companies and the mechanics who pay them to put potholes. It's possible. I just learned the other day that the Michelin Tire Company are the ones who started the Michelin restaurant grading system, and they did that so they would give restaurants out in the middle of nowhere good grades so that people would drive further.
What?
I'm not kidding.
That's incredible.
While I'm on that bend, the Guinness beer started the Guinness Book World of Records so that people would talk about amazing feats at bars and mention the name Guinness and want to buy more Guinness.
It's good facts, man.
This is interesting.
So the conspiracy is possible.
I need you for my trivia team.
I was going to say the LP here in Georgia seems like it's starting to find a real voice, Ryan. I mean, tell us about what's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's true. I see us as in a rebuilding phase right now.
Right.
And so I think for the last decade or so, we haven't really been doing a whole lot. There hasn't been a lot of movement, and I want to start seeing a lot of movement and start basically creating a place that people feel welcome in, so that we can start growing the thing, because there's a lot of libertarians in Georgia. I mean,
I think they're just people who are liberty minded. I think they've seen the Republicans and Democrats for who they are as parties now.
Yeah.
And I always say, and I know this is one of those areas where we jest, right? Where I say the Republican Party is absolutely full of rhinos, and you're like, well, no, you're the rhino in the Republican Party.
You're the rhino
because you stick out.
Yeah. If you start looking around and you're like, everybody's weird but me, maybe you're the weird one.
I don't think everybody is weird. I am the weird one.
Well, Rhino though.
Yeah, in terms of principles of the actual party, like when we talk about the party ethos and all that fun stuff that's transcribed and adopted in minutes across the United States, they don't vary all that much, and it's fiscal responsibility in terms of what their principles are. I'm not saying that they stick to them
Does
one way or
the
another.
website say that anymore? I don't even know if it does.
Probably not anymore. They've probably gotten rid of it, and they're protecting people like David Ralston and things like that. I mean, they've got some serious issues out there.
Well, in Georgia, they're just flat out Democrats. So.
I've said the same thing. I've always looked at what's going on here, and you turn and say, oh, all right, Democrat, Republican, and it doesn't really fit here in the South, because what you don't have down here is a bastion of small government, fiscal responsibility, individual liberty, and those things used to be what were more so upheld by the party members at large. In that concentrated sphere of the ones that just want to put their arm around the latest candidate and who's in office or whatever and get those photo ops, which I can't stand. Those people that just want to be close to somebody who's in power and call themselves Republicans, and you can't attack Republicans and all that kind of stuff. Get bent. Like that's not going to be a thing.
The 11th commandment thing. I recently learned about it. I had no idea.
The 11th commandment.
I wasn't politically involved until I joined the Libertarian Party, so I had no idea this 11th commandment thing even existed, which is thou shalt not criticize a Republican or something. That's what it is.
Yeah, I think it's Ronald Reagan came up with that, but they don't do that anymore. For somebody who operates in the Republican Party a lot, what they do now is they do it in this kind of covert with like unity. And unity is something that everybody loves, right? And they're like, well, okay, after these primaries, we just have to unite and not hate on each other now, guys. And you're like, I'm just talking about the fact that we still spend too much money. No, unite.
Yeah.
And it's the most violent call for unity I've ever heard.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and unite really just means like sit down, know your place, and
shut
do what
up.
I said.
Yeah, but it's funny. So there's a Republican creed. Most of the counties in Georgia adopt this as their official creed. And I've been in front of a group of Republicans. I've said the creed and been booed. But it is the most it's very libertarian.
Well,
it says, I do not choose to be a common man. It is my right to be uncommon. If I can seek opportunity, not security, I want to take the calculated risk to dream and build, to fail and to succeed. And it goes on, and I could see any libertarian saying all these things. It's actually quite like esoteric and a little bit weird, like us libertarians
like it should
can be.
Like it should be.
But they don't follow it whatsoever.
It's and that's the problem. It's all an idea.
You. Not only do they not follow it, but they boo you when you say it.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter who you are.
And I still go to Republican things.
Or where you've been. Yeah, no, and I think that's one of my main missions is taking the rhinos that I call rhinos and absolutely outing them for being the Southern Democrats that they are, right? I mean, that's who the Republican Party is in Georgia.
But even that is kind of a weird thing. The best congressman to ever come from Georgia was a Democrat.
Yeah, because labels don't mean anything.
1970s,
right?
Larry McDonald, who Ron Paul called before he ran for office, and was like, hey, should I run as a Democrat or a Republican? It really doesn't matter. I think it's interesting to talk about the parties and to analyze them and so forth. But we almost give them too much clout to analyze them as if there is any fundamental anything to it.
There's nothing.
It can switch from one thing to another.
And it's all down to the individual. If you get a strong leader who pops out, and I say leader, I hate that word, especially in politics. If you get somebody who is great at communicating the ideas of liberty, the Constitution, that person can move a party. And that's where I find the real culture shift that needs to happen is, most of the people who are out there, and I think we probably all agree, is most people just want to live their lives. They want to be left alone. They ascribe to the idea that we're all part of the non-aggression principle. Like we none of us go around threatening each other and taking each other's stuff. But when it comes to government type solutions, what we see is this heavy hand now from the rhinos in this party trying to use the state to enforce what they believe, and that's tyrannical. Any way you slice it. That's the problem I have is, and I say it all the time, is any tyranny is not benevolent. You may think you're going to be a benevolent dictator, but you never will be. That's anyway. So with what you're doing with the Libertarian Party, how long now have you been in the seat?
Oh, since like 2 months. since April.
So kind of got that new smell. You're starting to feel your way around.
Well, I was vice chair for 2 years before that, and they actually have it structured so that the vice chair has quite a bit of power actually over a lot of the goings-ons, and it really depends. And we had a chair who didn't do as much of the activity, so he ran for governor, so he was busy with some other things. So I actually have been running the party for a little bit longer. But it's still a new car smell, just because I've only been involved for like 4 years. Yeah,
so. and how are you being received? I mean, are you getting some good feedback from people who are out there?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I did when I got involved, 2 or 3 years ago, when I got involved on the executive committee, was start building up local affiliates, because we believe in localization, and the people who know their issues are the people who live in the community. So people in Augusta know the Augusta issues, people in Atlanta know the Atlanta issues. So I wanted to create that, and now a lot of the people that are involved are those affiliates. It's the people that are coming there, and so like I've given them a place to be. So I've been pretty well received with the active party, because I'm a lot of the reason that they've come in.
Very cool. So you said you weren't involved in politics before the LP,
right?
So what made you be involved in politics?
Is this origin story time? Is that right?
Yeah. Oh man, it's a great segue.
Yeah, because I'm sorry, because it's a boring one. It's a really boring one.
Well, your story?
Yeah.
No, there's no boring stories. This idea of everybody can relate to somebody else out there. That's what we have to be able to tell. We have to be able to tell these stories of what happened in your life. I mean, some people are just gifted with look at Banks. Banks came to Liberty in a way that I shake my head at. Like
my grandmother talked about fiat currency when I was little, so I'm very lucky.
Yeah.
Your grandmother. I never heard anything out of my grandparents about just liberty in general. Like, especially like not like fiat currency, not like individual rights, none of that kind of stuff.
It was mostly, it's funny because the fiat currency was probably the biggest thing she talked to me about. All the other stuff was just like a way of living.
Right.
And so like the individual rights thing, I wouldn't have like known that phrase. Just fiat currency. The Fed was a bad thing.
That's a pretty healthy dose of
I'm very
liberty
lucky
in the story. So, and that's the thing is like all these stories, somebody's going to relate to it. So
fair enough.
Without further ado, take us to your kind of your upbringing and your aha moments and all that fun stuff.
Well, so I thought I was a Republican ish, I voted for McCain in that election. I know.
We're done. Just kill it now.
That's what I did. Because I thought that's what you had to do. I didn't even know. I think Gary Johnson might have. No,
he didn't.
That was Ron Paul.
That was Ron Paul. Oh,
2008, McCain.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, it was Ron Paul.
Man, yeah. All right, even more dead to audience, right?
You sure you're qualified to be a libertarian?
No. We had a guest on yesterday who had voted for Obama in 2008.
I was ignorant, right? And actually, Obama ran as a civil libertarian his first time, so.
Very much. Yes.
He did.
Not completely,
his
but very
strong
much.
Points.
I remember when he won, I was like, okay, I don't like him, but at least he's anti-war.
Yeah.
He said he was going to close Guantanamo Bay.
That was a big. That was a big deal. It'll be an anti-war then, and totally flubbed that one. Jeez, Pete.
So I voted for McCain. That was my first election. I didn't really know what I was doing. I always knew that when people called me a Republican, I felt dirty. I was like, but I see these other things they're doing, and that's not really me. And so me and my dad used to take these long drives back and forth. My little brothers have a different mom, and so we'd go back and forth and pick them up and have them for the weekend and things like that. And we'd have these long talks, and we'd start talking about things, and basically I'd get down to, well, why don't we just leave those people alone? Why do we have to? Why are we talking about this? So like if you look at like LGBTQ, I think it was probably marriage at that point. I'm like, why do we care? Why do we have a say in this? Like why are these are consenting adults? Let them love each other,
right?
However they want. And he's like, you sound like one of those libertarian guys.
Your dad said this to you.
Yeah. And I was like,
what year is this?
This 2012 probably.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went and I looked up the Libertarian Party, because that's what people do. I think when you first get introduced to it, you're like, well, it's a political philosophy, so what's the party to say? And I started finding Gary Johnson stuff. This is 2012 Gary Johnson, so he was a lot stronger back then. I think.
What are you implying?
What?
I'm kidding. What are you implying about Gary Johnson there?
Oh, boy. I think he ran a weak campaign in 2016, much weaker than 2012. So...
Yeah, probably Bill Weld's fault.
It might be. I don't know. But I started looking into it, and it was like point by point by point. I was like, all right, that's me. Yep, this is my home now. So that's kind of where I got involved with libertarianism and like thinking about the ideas of liberty.
I mean, was it just nonstop consumption of things like Hayek and Mises and?
No, I never did that.
Really?
I'm not a big philosophy guy. I mean, I'll get into it and whatever, but like, I've been told by people that I basically get it.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of friends at Fee. Fee's based in Atlanta, and they have a lot of free books and stuff. And their big one is iPencil because that was Larry Reed. So I recently finally read it.
It's great, isn't it?
I read it to my daughter.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, we have this little book, and it's an essay, right? I mean, it's short. I just sat down and read it to her in like 20 minutes, and I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and to have that simple understanding, right? That can propel you so far in fighting for individual liberty and in what we in the liberty movement will profess. So I think that's a pretty cool story, man. Like,
I mean, I think the vast majority of people agree on the vast majority of things, and that's why there's so much potential because most people throughout their daily lives just go about not hurting other people,
right, and
not wanting to be hurt, which is like the crux of the whole thing.
I think it actually gives you a real strength. I mean, and for the people who are out there listening and watching, for somebody who hasn't gone down and read, everything on the Mises reading list or the Ron Paul reading list or things like that, where most of us will find ourselves in the beginning trying to absorb a lot of that kind of stuff. You have taken, the chair of the LP party. You are out doing things and trying to make something really happen, to be a catalyst here in Georgia for all the right reasons.
Right.
That is a tremendous statement. You don't have to be the end all be all in terms of the authority on economics, on trade, on the drug war, on the absolute tyrannical wars that we have going on in the United States in terms of foreign policy. You don't have to be the absolute go-to expert on any of that stuff to go out there and affect change in your own community, or in your case, your own state.
Right. Well, that's the strength of liberty in general, right? Is that we embrace diversity of thought, and other people. Just because I don't have the imagination to come up with some solution to whatever problem doesn't mean there's not somebody out there that has it.
So
I love it.
So question then, a lot of people who are, or a good chunk of people within the Republican Party would be like very small government, fiscally conservative, sometimes conservative on the social side, but and they even say things like, yeah, I'm very libertarian, but they won't make that shift because, well, then they calculate that they're going to lose power because, well, the Libertarian Party is too small.
People like to win.
Why do you think you didn't even, it doesn't seem like you even made that calculation, like, okay, well, the Republican Party kind of failed me, the Libertarian Party stands for what I believe, and you just made the shift without, did you even think about that?
I mean, yeah, so that's one of the reasons I go to Republican meetings every now and again, just to kind of remind myself why I don't go to Republican meetings often. Because you hear these people talk and you're like, oh, they don't represent me. And a common refrain that me and my partner use is that words mean things. And so when you call yourself a Republican, it means a thing. And I don't like what it means today. And I know that Shane, you disagree with what it means and that you think they're all misrepresenting it, right? But But I think that it paints a picture of you that people start to have expectations, and the expectation is not liberty. And so I don't want to say to anyone that I'm a Republican because I'm not. So
I'm just that weirdo that thinks everybody should get to the point where it's all liberty all the time, nothing else. I don't care about the label, and that's one of those problems that I have with just parties in general. And it's that whether it's the Republican Party, whether it's the Libertarian Party, Democratic Party, Green, I don't care, as long as I can start to put those little seeds out there for people.
Yep.
And
brush fires of freedom.
Yeah. I used to say it during the campaign. It's like baby birds. There are people who are just going to be brand new to the idea, because let's face it, government indoctrination centers aren't teaching kids the Constitution. They're not teaching them liberty. They're not teaching them economics. They're not teaching them trade. They're not teaching them foreign policy. They're not teaching them any of these type of things. And so for the first time that they ever hear something like this, their automatic, reaction is going to be to throw it up when it's too much, right? Like, yeah, so it's got to be, sometimes it's got to be these little bite-sized morsels that they can take home.
It's a slow boil.
Yeah, they can digest them. They can think about them in the privacy of their own head without, this constant bombardment, where we're calling names and doing this divisive crap that we do. It's like, hey, here's a seed. Go digest this for a little while, man. If you want to talk more about it later, come and talk to me. That is one of the ways that I've seen people really, really change over the course of, since even our campaign, when you get out there and you start talking to people who think they're Republicans, in terms of the big state type, you can walk them down from that pretty quick and just give them a couple nuggets and say, I'll see you later. And they come back and they're like, hey, man, I really like, if it was an article or a video or whatever you left them with.
Yeah.
They digest it, and the next thing they're doing is going out there and buying another book or something like that.
And that's a good message. I think one of the big problems with people in the libertarian movement is that we're so passionate about what we believe in, and we want people to know our views, and sometimes we go out there and we lead with sometimes the most extreme thing. Now, I'm not for lying about position, so when you're asked about things like legalizing drugs or whatever, answer it honestly.
Yeah.
But when you don't necessarily lead with your most extreme position, because that just pushes people away, and then they don't want to look at what you're looking at. So
yeah, it's kind of the Socratic method as well, right? I mean, you have to start from a principled base. If you can start from that principled base and have those discussions, you can set a premise. Now, after you get down the line with your questioning, and now your policy implementation doesn't align with that principle, now you start to see where it all kind of falls apart, and you can start to point to that and be like, well, if you believe this to begin with, then how do you reconcile this policy? If you believe that you have the right to do whatever you want with your body, then how do you tell somebody else that they can't have a cheeseburger or a big gulp or a bowl like that? Those type of things, to me, that's where the whole thing falls apart. And I think it falls apart for most people there.
Yep.
I mean, Democrat, Republican, Socialist, whatever they are, I think that's where most of these statists, this collective mindset, just falls apart. Is, yeah, I can do anything I want, but we're gonna use the use of government and force to come in and do something to prohibit you from doing something that you want to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was telling you guys before we came on the air about I went to the Human Rights Festival in Athens, and there was a guy that came over that said he was an anarcho-communist. I didn't tell you this part of the story either, so it's a news story. He basically was telling me that, I said, yeah, it's fine. You guys can go live in your commune, and it's not going to do as well, I think. But, you guys have every right to go do that. So. Go have fun, And he's like, yeah, but we're not going to do as well because, outside of the commune, there's going to be property rights, which they don't believe in, and they're going to affect us negatively. And I was like, so what do you do about that? And he's like, well, you got to force them. And I was like, okay, so where does that stop? Is it like Georgia? Is it America? So now are we talking about like taking over the world? Because that's the path that it usually goes down. And you just gave that to me, right? So
and who's the person doing the enforcing there?
Yeah. And what do you do when people say, no, I believe in private property rights? Well, you do what they've done throughout history. You put them all in, unmarked graves.
Yeah. Cages first, boxcars maybe, and then and then tons. I mean, literally hundreds of millions of people.
Yep.
Just slaughtered.
So people, I think, when they are confident in their intentions, which is a dangerous thing, then they don't think about the consequences of somebody enforcing it. They're like, well, I'm going to enforce it with all these good intentions I have here. And then you've got a few people who don't have good intentions. But I think for the most part, they're just confident in their intentions. They're like, well, what could go wrong? Like, I'm not going to do bad things.
This is a good idea. People are just going to agree with me.
Yeah.
We're libertarians. We know that's not that easy.
That's why I find so much potential in trying to bring the at least sizable portion of Republicans who believe in small government, because that's how you get in front of their eyes and ears, is to go there and be like, hey, let's follow these things that are the crux of your party, at least in name only. So yeah.
So, and the question that always pops up is, in terms of parties and memberships and all that kind of stuff, we've said it before multiple times that parties are kind of like tools. Like if you can use a tool to make inroads with individual liberty and everything that we espouse in the liberty movement, is it wrong, or where do you come down on guys like me going, hey, listen, the Republican Party is where I grew up. It's what I understand in terms of these set principles have not changed,
right?
And working there versus working in the Libertarian Party.
I do whatever you got to do.
Right.
Whatever home that you find the most comfortable and where you think that you can be the most effective. Seriously.
I'm definitely not the most comfortable.
Well,
that's very libertarian of you.
It is.
And the thing is the Libertarian Party is very small right now.
Yeah.
And, we don't necessarily get the vote counts that we would like. But what we are able to do is push issues. And so what we've been doing as a strategy for the last few years now is reaching out to single issue groups. So like we have a strategy session on Monday with the Justice Reform Partnership, which is the ACLU of Georgia, Southern Center for Human Rights, SONG, and a number of other organizations. This is a big group, and it's all criminal justice. So it's like we might not agree with them on everything, but we agree with them on reducing incarceration rates and in ending the drug war and all these other issues. And so we can work with them. Why wouldn't we work with them? So finding those bridges with organizations that we agree with. So even with the Republican Party, right?
Yeah.
They're reducing taxes even though they spend.
Right.
Well, let's agree on reducing taxes. We can get to the spending thing once we get there, but let's agree on this and let's work on that. And I think that's a strategy that's been working for us. Mm-hmm. And it's a strategy that helps us get more involved in all these groups, and people can have more interactions with us and not think that we're just like these cuckoos off on the fringes. And, they're like, well, they're right on criminal justice here. They agree with us on all these things. Maybe they're right about, X, Y, Z, and we can walk them down that path.
So most people who have a story of how they became a liberty person, libertarian, small L, whatever it is, usually have like one issue that got them down the road.
That's right.
I found that the biggest portion of that is war, but there are a plethora of people who were just leftist Democrats with a big heart, and who were like, I just saw that both parties supported war, and so I needed somewhere where I could like feel okay with myself, and then they came to all the other things because of that.
See, I'm backwards on that too. I liked the wars. I thought they were neat, right? I mean, like, because they're so I was a kid. By the way.
Me too,
I was a
man.
child.
Like I was a neocon, and you grow up playing Army and all this other.
Well, I watched Shock and Awe on TV, and I thought that was cool. Like, I just thought it was really neat.
Yeah,
I didn't think about that people are dying.
Right.
Every explosion was like tens of thousands of people maybe dying. So.
Yeah, it's a different thing, once you mature to the point where your brain understands that, hey, listen, these are people. Yeah. Most of them are probably fairly innocent people that are, in a sovereign country. What are we doing?
Right.
Especially without a declaration of war. This is one that I get all the time, man. The president has, the 1973 War Powers Act. God darn it, guys. Do you understand how the Constitution works? And that's the problem.
Right.
We don't. In terms of Constitution, we obviously don't think it's perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Or
What's your opinion?
We wouldn't. But what is your opinion on the Constitution?
I fall more on the bank side of things, where I think that it's a scrap of paper that has not done its job at all. So what use is it? But as far as rhetoric goes and connecting to certain people like Republicans, it is a good talking point, so you can use it to pivot on issues and talk about, well, if you believe in the Constitution, it's the Socratic method, right? Do you believe in the Constitution? Yes.
Yeah.
All right, then let's walk down this path. And now, does your stance actually coincide with what you're saying? So it's a useful tool, but if it were a good document, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that's the thing is, and the problem is no. There was no enforcement side, or what's funny is there is enforcement, but what's happened is when the state depends on the state to live its life, right, where you have law enforcement out there that is paid by the state and then incentivized by the federal government to uphold unconstitutional type law, and I use quotation marks there, and what you get is the interface, which is law enforcement out here eroding your rights. I mean, I've been on a tear lately, and
so I think what people I think most people want to feel comfortable, kind of safe in their ideas. When you go through any method to enforce some kind of government, okay, whatever structure it is, communist, statist, I mean, it's all statist, but in the end, you've got the question of, okay, we've got this great idea, we've planned it all on paper of how it's going to work, some checks and balances here, some oversight there. At the end, somebody who's thinking is going to ask, okay, well, how do we make sure that our idea like works? And so whatever enforcement method you use, in the end, it's just about power.
Yeah.
It's actually not secure. And I think a lot of people are not ready to be told, hey, no system is actually secure. But because they don't want to feel uncomfortable, they just like suspend belief and are like, it's just magical. This paper is going to radiate all these like nice vibes out
Safety
there. But
is an illusion for sure.
It's about power in the end, and I don't think this is maybe the right message to make everybody feel comfortable. It's kind of like banks, like be quiet. We don't like it, but there must be some way to communicate to people. You are in the end going to feel empowered, even if you feel uncomfortable for a minute, while you're coming to the conclusion that no system is going to have any inherent perfect way to make sure that the system exists.
And in the end, humans have to implement it, right? And we're flawed, so there's going to be issues with that. I think it was I forget where the quote came from. I think it was in Georgia, but a lawmaker basically said, oh, we don't worry about if it's constitutional before we pass the law. That's for the courts. Somebody will challenge it in the court.
Isn't that the most ridiculous damn thing you've ever heard?
Yeah, that's your job, dude. Like, what's your problem?
You haven't. They all have, and that's the thing is they all swear an oath to uphold the Constitution. It's Article 6, Section 3, and it drives me nuts that, in this day and age with all the knowledge that we have, it's just one of those things that people kind of just gloss over. I hear the legislature say that. I hear when I talk to my local sheriff here, I hear him and other sheriffs out there say, well, I'm just upholding the law and this is going to have to be challenged in court. People like, it's like, okay, so I've got the legislature saying, well, it's not really our job to uphold the law. It's in as executives, it's not our job to determine whether the legislature passes a constitutionally, delegated type of law out there. It's all on the shoulders of these people in the magical black robes in the judiciary to decide one way or not, prescribe to everybody in the masses what will be enforced and what will not be enforced.
And in Georgia, they're largely appointed by the governor.
Nobody wants to take it's about responsibility, because your sheriff is like, well, what do you want me to do, Shane? You want me to decide what's constitutional or not?
I want you to uphold the Constitution like you said you would in your oath.
And the other thing about that is the sheriff constantly allocates his resources to things and ignores other things. He's always doing that. He has to do that. So for him to say that is a total cop-out, because he does it every day, all day.
Yeah. That's what they do. I can decide to uphold this law and this law and this law, and maybe not so much this law. And that's what I hear all the time. I'll commend him. If he's busting some kids, the first time with less than an ounce of cannabis on him or something like that, and then they try to not throw him into prisons and get him into the awful criminal justice system that we have. I'll commend that part of it.
Well, the reason they do that is because of culture. Because if culture hadn't changed on that point, people who are just following orders, which is a bad argument, but whatever, would not change. The only reason they do that is because of culture, which should empower us to feel like there is a chance to change things.
That's the thing. Even here in Forsyth County, if he was doing that, he would lose his damn job, right? Like if you're throwing every kid that you catch with cannabis in a cell, these parents out here in white bread Forsyth County they're going to lose their minds and get a new sheriff. Like that's the thing, is they're already pushing for things like this. It's already culturally acceptable that, hey, you know what, once in a while, kids do it. You did it when you were a kid. You just admit and have some humility in your life where you can say, hey, listen, I was a kid. I did some things that I probably, should not have done. Did I hurt anybody? No, I didn't. But at the same time, was it legal? No. So the culture's already pushed it there. The cops are already deciding one way or another how strictly to enforce law, and then you get the pushback, and I can't do that one. I can't take a stance on like red flags. Like you're already picking and choosing arbitrarily what laws to follow. The legislature is obviously completely arbitrary in the way that they pass budgets and laws, and you're sitting there going, nobody's responsible. Nobody in seats of power wants to be responsible, take a stand, and do anything.
Right.
Yet they demand of us to be hyper responsible, which I think is a good thing too. But we're supposed to not have any ignorance of the law, which is impossible to know all.
Yeah.
I like that's what I do. Is just like
and
read,
you're still
read
probably
laws,
not,
and I have no idea of like 97% of
You're
it.
probably one of the most well-versed people I know in terms of law, especially here in the state of Georgia. And there's not any possibility to have a full understanding of what, as a citizen, that you can have force used against you for.
Yeah, and then what? So I'm thinking here. I'm like, okay, we're going up and down. Like hopeful, then we're like, oh, there's so many laws we can't even know them. Like less hopeful. So what the solution is, and then I'm going a little bit more defeatist here, is that people still see problems. They're like, I mean, most people would admit, yeah, there's lots of laws, and I don't know most of the laws, and some of them annoy me and so forth. But it seems like very often when there is a tension, they want to put off that responsibility, or the solution that a lot of people seem to embrace is the wrong solution. It's like, okay, well, we'll let the politicians kind of rewrite that and make it better instead of welcoming the problem. I think seeing problems is a wonderful thing, but instead of being happy that Shane exposes this problem with the red flags, they're like, oh, we'll just let the courts take care of it. How do you think it's best that people are confronted with problems and don't look at these solutions which just make the problems worse?
I mean, so that's one of the big problems with messaging liberty in general is because people are hardwired to take the path of least resistance. And the easy answer is, oh, the politician's going to fix this, or there should be a law or something like that. And people are like, oh, that'll fix it. I'm like, well, there's already a law to end crime, right? So why is there crime? I mean, right? I mean,
Right.
So that's
you
obviously
should clip that
not
out
there.
and use that.
Oh, that's definitely going up. Like we talk about it all the time, right? Like rape, murder, assault, kidnapping, coercion, property damage,
Yeah, there's
burglary,
laws against
theft,
that.
like all that kind of stuff. Everything else is kind of like, well, they didn't hurt anybody. Did they do one of those things? Okay, then fine. Get them on that. But outside of that, like, why are we using resources, from the and I say the resources, the deputy's time, the transportation, what they could be doing instead of, going out and enforcing these, what was Hannibal Buress call them, fantasy crimes? Yeah, I mean, all that kind of stuff where, what a different society it would be. I'm not saying.
So you're saying the guy that came to cite the building that's across from me for having his grass too high could have been doing something more productive?
Maybe like like figuring out who burgled somebody's house, or if
processing
somebody,
rape kits.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's tons of these things out there for them to do, but instead they're out there doing revenue generation for fantasy crime.
Well, and code enforcement is a whole different issue because typically that's used by one neighbor towards another neighbor as an act of aggression. They don't normally care. They're like, your grass is fine, but maybe they were playing their music a little loud like earlier, and so they found something to complain about, and it was their grass. They called the cops on them. Cops don't generally go around looking for high grass, right?
No,
they get called on
it
that.
seems like
Code
kind of a
enforcement's
waste.
call. But what I was going to say about like the simplicity message, right, and path of least resistance is that typically libertarian ideas, we don't necessarily have the answer because we embrace diversity of thought, and we're like, well, I don't have to have the imagination, somebody else might. But also the answers that we do have are white papers, or like, oh, maybe you should read this this paper by Hayek and blah blah blah, and people just glaze over, and when you're explaining, you're losing, so people just kind of they ignore it.
Blue screen of death a lot of times.
Yeah, you can see them start to like check their watch and
fidget.
Yeah.
So the LP should put together a website of like, here are the 50 things that people will actually like listen to you on. I think you mentioned one earlier, the rape kits. Like everybody can agree that rape is a horrible thing.
Let's solve those.
We should probably prioritize
it. Should remain illegal. And if there are kits that are not being tested so that there can't be like the further investigation, like we should probably prioritize that. That's probably more important than the height of the grass.
Can you imagine if you actually had sheriff's offices, police out there, federal law enforcement that did something like that? Hey, when you get done with all of these rape kits, solving these murders, these child abduction rings, sexual predation, and everything else that's out there, robberies. Then, when all that's done and your inbox is clear, okay, then go out maybe for a little. And I don't want to give even that, but
I know where you're going.
I'm so stingy, but hey, then okay, if you want to go out and do some extra policing in the community to shake hands and stuff, I'm fine with that.
Here's what's interesting. I was listening to a guy make an argument the other day for crowd-funded government. So it would just be voluntary, and you'd be able to see like what you wanted to fund. If there was a sheriff's department that actually had priorities, and the first 10 priorities were all things that I agreed with, like theft and burglary and assault, that's all bad things, and they said, oh, we don't have enough money to test 1,000 backlog rape kits, I might actually voluntarily donate to that, because I don't want that not going investigated and hopefully solved. And
so my partner actually did her dissertation on something like that, crowdfunding policy issues for candidates. And basically it said it was like a GoFundMe, right? So people put their money in, and the sample that we did was cannabis legalization for Obama. And basically, if he legalized it, he'd get access to this money, and then he'd be able to, then the donation would happen on your behalf. And then if it doesn't happen, then everyone gets refunded their money.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is a great idea.
What does she do for a living?
She's a PhD in rhetoric. She's a writer.
PhD in rhetoric.
Yeah.
What you can specialize in these days is amazing.
Arguments don't go well in our house.
No,
I opt out of those.
You're that
aggression.
Really has to pick your battles. I always talk about keeping those aces around and happy wife, happy life kind of thing. There's a very few times when you want to challenge that. You, on the other hand, you're like, oh man, do I even play the ace here? No.
What do you need?
Is she a libertarian as well?
Yeah. She's actually the vice chair of the state party.
So
there's nepotism going on, is what I hear.
Well, I voted NOTA.
Really?
She voted NOTA too.
So for those who might not understand what NOTA is, it's none of the above.
Yeah.
And it used to be an option in almost every state on the presidential level. Nevada was the last state to have that option, but libertarians use it quite a lot.
It's in our bylaws. And every election must have NOTA.
Which I think is wonderful, because if not, how can you tell if there is dissent for?
Yeah, there's got to be candidates that are worth your vote, or you get to say no. This is wrong. Let's redo this.
Yeah, I'd rather just not have anybody than somebody misrepresenting us.
Amen, man.
We should have at the state level. It's like if NOTA gets more than 50%, there is no state.
Talking about that, great segue into ballot access.
Oh, yeah.
The Libertarian Party in the state of Georgia has probably the most atrocious ballot access laws in the entire country.
Yeah,
so
a lot of people think
all
it's the
third
worst,
parties
so.
and even independent candidates,
Independents,
right?
yeah, it's equal. So third parties are actually called political bodies. We're not even classified as political parties,
right?
In Georgia, and independents, we all have the same rules applied to us.
So let's explore this a little bit, because I think there are a lot of people that don't understand this that are in our listenership out there. The ballot access here in Georgia. Take us through the different levels of the offices. So from your city up to your county, state, and then the federal level in terms of ballot access in the laws.
So city is typically nonpartisan, so that actually it has no bearing. We can nominate somebody and they don't get an L next to their name anyway. There's no R next to anybody's name. There's no D. There's still an I think, which is problematic in different ways. But an I for incumbent, not I for independent.
Right. So at the city level, you can make some real inroads being a libertarian. Then
we could, but the problem is I know of people in city government today who are libertarian, but they're not out to use a word.
Do you want to be liberty out?
I mean, they're like, here, I showed up to this meeting, but like literally don't tell anyone.
Wow.
Yeah, and so like I've had somebody tell
me
that.
That is very anti libertarian type thought.
They think they won't get elected if they're associated with the Libertarian Party.
The problem is that even the best of people, the system is very powerful, whether it be emotionally, like logically, practically, and it beats you down. So if you don't even have, I'm not talking bad about them necessarily, but if you don't have the confidence to even espouse your ideas, a label kind of highlights those ideas. But if you don't have the courage to espouse your ideas and be like, no, I think we should have as few taxes as humanly possible in this city, and they're like, well, how are we going to run things?
Yeah.
Like, then that gets beat out of you at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and like I said, they still showed up to the meeting. They were just like, don't tell anyone. So, okay, that's fine. Whatever.
That's funny.
So, there's that, and then there's the countywide. So partisan races that are districted have another set of rules. So that includes U.S. House, that includes county commission, that includes General Assembly, which is state legislature. And that is 5% of active registered voters. We have to get a petition for 5% of active registered voters in the district.
Yeah,
So
and that just changed this time around, correct? Where when we talk about, I think this idea for everybody being registered to vote,
automatic registration.
Automatic registration.
Yeah.
What that does is it absolutely destroys anybody else, if you're not a Republican or Democrat,
Yeah.
from getting on, because now you're thinking about it. If you just got your everyday registered voters now,
Right.
which is, I don't know, maybe 60%. Let's just say it's 60%. Somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, it's something like
Yeah.
that.
Now
it's a little higher because a lot of people get registered semi-automatically when they get a driver's license.
If you only have to get 5% of that total 60% of people who are registered, and now you increase that 60% to 100%, that 5% grows by over, obviously, 40%. I mean, this is going to crush people who are
we have
not.
almost 7 million registered voters and 10.5 million, so it's more like 70%.
So,
actually.
So to put some numbers on it, for a congressional race like Shane ran,
Yeah.
how many petition signatures do you
So
need?
for U.S. House, we have to get about 20,000 signatures from active registered voters in the district, which is...
And you need over that because a lot of them get invalidated because people move around and so forth.
You should really get double that. We tell people between like 60% and double.
Yeah.
Extra on top of it.
So we spent close to 6 months, 7 months knocking on doors. We knocked on 16,000 doors in the end. That means that a lot of those doors didn't have a person there. Probably about half we left like a piece of a flyer and a little note saying we love you.
Don't tell people that.
We need you, and a smiley face. That's an inside joke for Shane. But that seems...
I got a letter. I mean, I know.
That seems like how are you supposed to do that as an individual? Like, we put a lot of time and effort into that. We had like about 100 volunteers.
I don't think you can consume enough calories to do something like that.
So the thing is they put that law in place in the 1940s to combat communism, actually, which is not constitutional. And no one has done it since. No one, not a single. Well, so there was Cynthia McKinney's father actually got it done in a special election.
Yeah.
But it was also they weren't checking the signatures. They were just like, yeah, sure.
Wow.
So and they could actually do that today too. So that's like their discretion on whether or not they just are able to say whether this is valid or not.
Who is
right
they?
Now. It is the county election boards. That's who you turn them into. So you have to get petitions.
I thought it was the Secretary of State.
Well, so then they turn in what their findings are to the Secretary of State, and then the Secretary of State makes their declaration. Sort of like the elections. County election boards count everything up, and then they send it to the Secretary of State, and then they verify. Right?
So who makes up county election boards?
Appointed Republicans and Democrats.
and it doesn't seem like a conflict of interest at all.
Yeah, if you actually go look at it, the rules as stated are like the Republicans get to put this many people and the Democrats get to put this many people, and then they all like nominate their leader, and yeah.
That's such a weird system.
Yeah.
Golly. This just paints the most perfect picture of the duopoly, the private corporate clubs. Like, if you're not one of us, don't even think about it. If you don't think that the higher echelon at the Republican and Democrat parties are not in bed together, that's all the more proof that you need. Is if they're making up every county commission on who can run and who cannot run, and they're getting to pick out the signatures. Say you did get double, it doesn't guarantee you anything in terms of getting on a ballot.
Right.
There's some cool stories of libertarians who have collected a lot of signatures, state reps, who have had them invalidated.
Jeff Amonson ran up here, I think.
In Cherokee.
But yeah, I live
Close,
in Atlanta.
close
This is-
enough.
so-
This is all just this nebulous.
It's OTP for the audience. OTP here in Atlanta means outside the perimeter. ITP is inside the perimeter.
We're way out in the boonies.
Yeah.
I don't even.
It's just
I don't even know
another.
what this
It's
is.
just another fault line here.
So he collected enough signatures. I don't know the exact amount, but basically his wife. So all these signature pages are required to be notarized, and his wife is a notary. So she collected some signatures and notarized some other signature pages. She never notarized any of her own signature pages because, of course, that would be a conflict of interest.
Sure.
But they invalidated every single one of her pages that she notarized or that she all the signatures she gathered because they said that you can't do both. So, I mean, if you go look at the Georgia Code, I don't think it's very clear that that's actually against the law. That doesn't make any sense. But the judge ruled, and so then there it is. And then he was not included on the ballot.
Georgia, if you're even a Democrat and a Republican at large out there, not part of the leadership, not just doesn't attend meetings, if you think this is okay, you're part of the problem. You're part of this collective mindset that you think that only Democrats and Republicans should be representing America's. I mean, right now, we've got maybe 18 to 20% of the American people in the Democratic Party. You've got probably somewhere between 16 and 18% in the Republican Party of Americans. I mean, the vast majority of Americans do not identify with a political party at all because they see them as corrupt as hell. And now you start to understand why it is corrupt as hell, is that these two parties are controlling access to who you're represented by. And most of the time, it's the good old boy club who's got the most money, who can do the most damage to, some candidate that's out there. And then if all else fails, pick and choose which signatures that they're going to accept. And maybe you did get double, but you're not going to be even on the ballot because you're a threat to the establishment.
It's even worse than that. You've got the way that it's structured within the parties for how they're allowed to qualify and so forth, pushes out those who might be on the have less money and might have more fringe ideas because you still have to pay a certain amount of money to qualify we paid $5,200 for you to qualify as a Republican for Congress.
That's not in the Constitution anywhere.
Half of that money goes to the Republican Party, who is fighting actively against you.
Yeah.
There's a bigger issue there. So it's 75% goes to the Republican Party, and it's paid directly to the Republican Party first, and then they take a 25% cut and send it to the Secretary of State's office. Whereas the Libertarian Party and all political bodies are required to pay that fee directly to the Secretary of State, and then they cut us a 75% check back after the election. So while the Republicans and Democrats are getting flush with cash while they're collecting these filing fees
on the front end,
and they're getting this cash right when they need it for the election, we're losing a big chunk of cash and we're not getting it back. And this year we didn't get it back until I was like, hey, where's that check? Like a month ago I asked them and they were like, what check?
Why is there money involved in the first place?
Yeah.
Why should you have to give a bunch of money?
You want to talk about a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
I mean, sending money to the Secretary of State. Who's in charge of elections? What the hell are we doing?
Yeah.
But then you have political bodies who are getting automatic money for there's not really a free market of political parties. We've just been through that, obviously. But if somebody gets automatic money and whatever their actions are, it doesn't matter. That same amount of money is going to flow in. Those actions are going to get pretty perverted. That's
real quick.
That's the nature of market intervention.
We've tried to fix it two ways within the Libertarian Party. One, if you pay your own filing fees and we get your 75% back, we just cut you a check back. So you get it back eventually. It's like a deposit on your candidacy, I guess. And then for all statewide candidates, we have a fund specifically set up where we just say we're going to pay your 75% because we're going to get it back anyway. Mm-hmm. So we've fundraised on it and we have a bank account that we are not allowed to touch for any other reason. And if you say you want to run for statewide office, you get your 75% of your filing fees paid. So we've cut it down to, for our candidates, basically they're only paying 25% for statewide only.
That's really nice, but it's still a big burden on the Libertarian Party.
Yeah, it sucks.
Well,
it's not like it was harder. It's like you've got to get 20,000 petition signatures. You've got to have all this fundraising effort that actually just goes to nothing, that just goes to pushing back against an arbitrary law in the first place.
Yeah.
What are the other hardships that might be forced upon the LP?
As far as ballot access goes, or
just the whole system there?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, ballot access is always going to be the number one issue because I think as a political party, we have to be there to help candidates get on the ballot. That's got to be our primary role because we're a political organization. That is our primary goal. And so I think we try to attack that in a couple of different ways. One, we're actually suing the Secretary of State right now. We started suing Brian Kemp in 2017. Now it's Raffensperger. On saying it's unconstitutional what you guys are doing here for the 20,000 signatures. We have a little bit of precedent. The Green Party and the Constitution Party brought a suit against the Secretary of State some years ago, and they won, and they got it reduced from the 1% that it requires, 1% petitioning statewide to get on the ballot, down to 7,500 signatures. So we're hoping that they'll reduce it similarly, at least, if not get rid of it. So right now we're suing them right now. That's active, ongoing litigation. And then the second step is actually getting legislation put in place to change the law. So HB 191 is active legislation. It's right now in the committee for the Governmental Affairs Committee, which is chaired by Ed Reinders, who has all but told us he's not going to do that. He's not going to let it out. He's not even going to have a hearing. He can unilaterally make the decision not to hear about a proposed law. So that's what he's doing.
What committee is that?
Governmental Affairs.
Governmental Affairs.
Do you have him on audio or video saying these things?
No, and that was part of the problem is, so we had an independent candidate who tried to petition to get on the ballot and failed, and she went up and was lobbying, and she was sending all kinds of documents to the people who were on the Governmental Affairs Committee, as well as him. And then finally she reached out to him and said, let's have a meeting. And he said, okay, that's fine. And she was all excited. She's super like, oh, I have a meeting with the chair. This is great. Everything's moving. And he, closes the door and is like, what are you doing? And he tells her that she's not allowed to have contact with the committee members, that's not how things are done.
God.
That she's not allowed as a citizen to lobby on her own behalf.
I like how he conflates it's not how things are done and you're not allowed to together.
Yeah. And then she pushed back. I forget the word exactly, but she's this sweet lady who ran. And I mean, she's basically like, I've never been politically active in my life, but now I am. And I just want to see the system work. And like,
and she's not even a libertarian?
No, she's not. And he basically was like, oh, I need a witness in here to discuss this or whatever. And then he basically told her that we weren't going to have a hearing. And when we reported that out on social media and in articles and stuff, I found him in the hallways at the Capitol. And I was like, hey, Chairman Reinders, I'm pretty respectful when it comes to that kind of stuff, just because that's how
being professional.
How things are done.
Yeah.
I call him by his title, Chairman Reinders, and we got him over there, and I started trying to talk to him about HB 191, and he was like, oh, let me tell you about this person that came by, how dare she, and you need to get your people together. I'm like, well, one, she's not really my people, right? Like, she's out here.
She's an independent.
She's a citizen that is worried about it, and she's pushing for this. And yes, I knew she was pushing for it, but she's not a libertarian. She's not working on that with us.
On your behalf, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. She's working on her own behalf. And he could not get off of talking about her. And then he started talking about us saying that he wasn't going to have a hearing. He's like, well, I never said that. And I was like, well, she said you did. And he's like, exactly. It's hearsay. And I was like, well, so are you telling me you are going to give me a hearing on this? Well, let's hear it then. And his quote was, I'm not about to sit here and sell out in the hallway like that. And I'm like, what?
Sell out?
Yeah, what do you mean?
Yeah, well, so you're into protectionism because you're scared that if there was a different, and that's what this all boils down to, they're scared. If you actually had, people who could, get on to ballots, the Democrat and the Republican establishments would be absolutely toast.
So here's the main reason he's scared, and we talked about this before the show, is because he's a chairman. Ooh, it's all.
Oh, yeah. Pomp and circumstance.
It's prestigious. It means that you can literally give yourself $173 a day as many times as you want. So, like, money is important for people. They don't make that much money, and that makes a huge difference. Like, a chairman makes 3 or 4 times as much as a normal rep. But the reason he's really scared is because that chairmanship is not within his control. Ralston, the speaker, gets to appoint chairman and gets to take away that. He can do it whenever he wants for no reason or for any reason.
Another reason to get rid of that guy.
Yeah.
Well,
in case there weren't enough already.
The umpteen million, or no, it's almost a little over 1,000 plus reasons.
1,091 reasons.
Ralston is a symptom, and so I think that when we get into Ralston and you say another reason to get rid of him, it's a reason to change the system, not necessarily. We need to get rid of him, right?
Yeah.
Jump on the bandwagon.
The guy needs to go, man.
But who's to say the next guy's not going to be worse, and we have to do the
completely
same thing
agree.
again?
I completely agree.
The LP is actually working on a resolution right now, and we are very specifically not calling for him to resign or step down or calling for the GOP to ask him to step down or anything like that. We're asking for a change in the law to not show deference to any profession. That's kind of what we're saying, is that lawyers don't deserve special circumstances. They're not inherently better at anything other than...
Look at you guys being all practical.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
So logical. Even though that is like the most intelligent approach to it that I've heard, and I agree with it, I still like the Ralston bashing.
Yeah, well, here's the deal.
I mean,
I'm just being all emotional over here.
I'm the guy that's going to sit there and tell you he's broken federal law. Like he has conspired with other people to deprive people of their right to a speedy trial. That in itself is a felony, and he should be locked in a cell for the rest of his friggin' life, no matter how short it is.
So
we went back. However long the jury decides he should be in jail for.
Yeah, life.
He's
old.
We went back and forth on it a little bit because Derek Somerville's doing his great work, and he's recently come out and said, no, this is probably illegal what he did here, because he went golfing one of those days when he should have been in court as a fundraiser, which is a fundraiser part of your official capacity. I think that there is a little room for interpretation. I don't think it is, but I could see where an argument is going to be made that it is part of his professional,
he'll say it.
Responsibilities.
He'll, if he can write it off on taxes, he'll definitely say it's part of his professional responsibilities.
It seemed soft at best, and if he ever got convicted, then I would feel very comfortable being like, step down. But if it was, it's a little squishy.
Yeah, I think the guy, and just in terms of when you look at private and public sector, and what his job is. Being the Speaker of a House is a privilege and a responsibility, and to exercise the power the way he has for not only political gain but financial gain, and gaming the system and taking on clients that he could use this to protect. That to me is all I need to say. Not only should he not be Speaker, but he's probably committed some real crime that it needs to go through the trial process. He's alleged right now, and until that's actually proven by a jury of his peers, then that's all it will ever be. But yeah, you guys know where I stand on this.
I'd have no problem with it going to a trial, and I think that there's definitely there's that argument. He organizes his own fundraisers, right? Fundraisers don't happen unless he's like, hey, let's do a fundraiser.
And he's a professional politician, right?
But I hope that most of the attention stays on the systematic problem and Ralston himself, because as we talked about earlier, the enforcement, like, that's just a power struggle. I want people to see the innate problem with, hey, if there's going to be so much power, and power within this government has to be like split up, there's always going to be a problem because somebody's going to have that power. Let's just take that power away. Just make it not exist.
Well, and to get it back to ballot access, so if people in his district are fed up with it, 60% of all General Assembly members run unopposed every single year. So, or last year at least, and then the stats hold up over a number of years. Nobody runs it. I mean, Ralston doesn't get opposition. He doesn't get Democratic opposition. But then the other thing is even if there was a Democrat, what are people in his district supposed to do? Vote for a Democrat? Like, that's the option.
Up there, that's Blue Ridge. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to mention he has all the big donors.
Yeah, people are going to stay home. That's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And then he's going to get reelected.
He'll still
anyway.
get reelected.
Yeah, because he only needs one vote.
Right.
And he doesn't even have to make that vote. He could get 0 votes, and if it's 0-0, the state law assumes that he voted for himself and he wins.
Perfect.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Well, I guess it'd have to be 1-2 or 1-0, right?
That probably never happens.
Yeah,
but
the
what
state
does
law
happen
assumes you vote for yourself.
What does happen every so often is there's a Republican in the state house right now who just put his name on the ballot. Nobody ran against him in the primary or the general, and he just became.
Yeah.
I would imagine we could have found somebody who would have run as a Libertarian against him.
Yeah. But they would also not been able to campaign for as long, and they would have had to have used some of their campaign funds to get signatures. So there's all kinds of inherent problems. But
I actually don't know the answer to this question, but I think there's a time period from which you're allowed to get those campaign signatures.
It's 180 days before the
so
I forget the date.
In 180 days.
Yeah.
So not only do you have to get signatures, you have to get signatures within a time period. So it's not just 20,000, it's 20,000 within
6
this
months.
time period.
It's like the end of January all the way to June or July. It's 180 days.
6 months.
Yep.
6 months to get that many signatures.
Oh, and you have to file.
And the thing
you
is,
have to file in March, so you have to pay them that filing fee. For a U.S. house, I think it's like $3,500 or
it's over.
It's $5,224.
Yeah, so you have to pay that for the U.S. House even before you know if you're going to be on the ballot or not. And then they don't just give it back to you once you're not on the ballot. You got to wait till after the election and ask for it.
Do they give you interest on having?
Come on.
Do you know how much inflation is and how much you're
question
losing?
For some of those listening, but come on, man.
God, what a sham, man! Like, we talk about banana republics all the time too, and I mean every day. You know, like you're my disappointment. Like I don't know. You start with that full glass in the morning, right? And you start with that full glass, and like every day, you're just learning something new about how damn corrupt this whole system is, and how it's just fixed. And you're just like, oh man, like I'm parched. I'm getting down to the point where that glass is so damn empty.
We can make it worse. If you're going door to door, as we've done, you're going to have probably like 0.5% of the time, not a lot, you're going to have the cops called on you, and they're going to be like, what are you doing here? You're not allowed to be here. You're, of course, allowed to be there.
Right.
So
small detail, but for somebody who has managed hundreds of volunteers, there are volunteers, at least I'd say 10 or 20%, who are not comfortable and who do not return after they have had a bad interaction and been told by cops that they're not allowed to be there.
And a lot of times they don't even know that they're able to stand up to them. Even if you coach them on it beforehand, they're just like, nope, cop said it, I'm doing it. Like, this could end up bad.
And that's what you should tell them. Like, I tell every volunteer, like, if you're not comfortable in any situation, just like leave.
We tell them to skip the neighborhoods that say no soliciting, even though it's not technically soliciting.
Shane, what do we do when there's neighborhoods with no soliciting?
I canvass anyway because it's not soliciting, and you know, I educate people. God, I mean,
I figure you're just gonna piss those people off, so like, may as well, like, there's not gonna be a lot of yeses in that.
Most
they're
people
gonna be annoyed.
Most people are actually receptive.
It's funny,
not to change your policy, but most people are receptive. There will be maybe like 5% of people who mention the soliciting.
Yeah.
But even those people, when you tell them, oh no, there's
this is political canvassing.
That's not the law, and they care about the law, so you have to mention that word to them, even though it's less important to us.
I think I had one door where I actually got somebody, this is soliciting, and I was like, hey man, I'm not trying to buy your vote. That's illegal. I would like to ask you for your vote consensually. Get the hell out of here, blah 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 blah. And you know, we had the cops called on us a couple times out there. Yeah. I mean, and you have your interfaces with law enforcement.
Most of them are pretty
well,
fine too.
As long as you tell them, hey man, this is campaigning, this is political canvassing, it's completely different in terms of statute and everything. So,
but that's our experience. I have experienced volunteers who have been told by the cops you're not allowed to be there, and they just left. So the only reason that's more proof that if you don't flex your rights, it's not very original. Like, you don't have your rights.
It's exactly right. And as soon as you challenge them on that, they're like, oh, okay, see you later.
But the same cop who sees somebody who's confident says, no, I'm allowed to be here, for whatever like more human reason, he's like, oh, he must be allowed to be here.
Well,
and there is actually a funny volunteer story about that where the cops called on him, and he ended up getting the cop to sign the petition.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
we tried to do that every time we met a law enforcement officer.
Most of them were very receptive.
Well, hey man,
I think it's because Shane has that bald head.
Well, yeah,
he's like, he's one of
show
us.
Show me your military card.
The fact that I've been there and done it, you know, hey man, this is what we're doing. You wanna get on board with the Hazel team here? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm in, man. Here's a sticker or whatever, and off to the races we go. But I always looked at those solicitation signs as a challenge. I mean, a front gate. I mean, the front gate I couldn't get past. It's just, hey, we're going in. We're going to start knocking on doors and meeting anybody and everybody we can. I'll tell you what. There was something. Jacob Leddy. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Nope.
He was a representative. Well, ran for Congress out of Texas, and
as a libertarian.
As a libertarian.
Oh, okay.
Younger guy.
He's planning on running in Oregon, where he lives now.
Yeah,
Okay.
but he was one of those guys like, hey man, I didn't even have an app. Like you could see like the consternation in Banks' face. Like I didn't have an app to go out and target voters. He's like, man, I just realized that if I just talked to everybody that I came in contact with, no matter what, I was more likely to get their vote than not.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's what I thought too. And Jacob did he did well, but
we had spreadsheets. We use spreadsheets.
Different strategies.
Yeah.
It's just
apps are expensive.
Yes, they are, and they're buggy.
They're buggy,
Yeah.
but I'll tell you what though, there is something to it. I mean, I'm trying to remember this guy's name who ran the Trump campaign out there. This guy, he had the math all figured out. He was like, listen, you're going to be this and this, the whole populist thing. That's by design. Like they ran the numbers on who's where and what the messaging was and who's going to vote this way and that way. And they went to those places and they hammered those things. I mean, that's how you pull off Michigan, and he got Wisconsin. He did not get Minnesota, I don't think. But he got a lot of those weird like Pennsylvania type states where in the past they largely had gone Democrat because they just went to those areas, focused on a populist message which was polling well, and then targeted voters.
I didn't used to like to be so like strategical about it. I'm like, we just go out there and say love and liberty, and everybody's gonna like crowd around us.
Strategical a word? Is that
strategical?
I don't know.
It's totally a word.
Is that strategery?
Today,
If it isn't, I just made up the word, and there's no laws about making up
Fool me
words
once.
yet.
That's fair. And
in
it means a
France,
good
actually,
thing.
there are laws about words, and
yeah.
there's a bureau of
Culture.
language, and it used
like
to
Canada.
George Bush would have
That's
gotten the death
insane.
penalty.
But I understand the strategy, like being smart.
Yeah.
Focusing on if you're in a Republican primary, people who vote in Republican primaries, because if not, you might be wasting your time.
Yeah.
But in the end, I don't think it's a waste of time. I'd like to just knock on every single door. I keep telling myself, I try to amp myself up that I'm going to go in my neighborhood, just knock on every single door and just talk to them about liberty. But without the justification of a campaign, I can't seem to force myself.
So
to do
I'm
it.
going to call you when we're doing our next tabling event, so you can just talk to people all day.
Okay.
This isn't enough.
The
He
tabling
needs
thing
more.
is the tabling thing is cool.
You'd rather go door to door?
No, I could do the tabling thing.
We can work with
is
whatever
like,
you need, man.
Yeah, I
the
mean,
tabling thing is like an entry to the door to door.
Yeah.
But the door to door without the excuse of campaigns, and I've knocked on like 25,000 doors, but
Yeah.
I've always got like, hey, I'm selling this guy.
Yeah.
It's Jehovah's Witness again.
So
Banks Wise again.
So back to the two things you're talking about. You're talking about the lawsuit and the bill. On the lawsuit, real fast, what is the constitutional justification?
That they are limiting the oh man, sorry, I'm
That's
blanking
okay.
right now. It's just like brain fart. It's limiting freedom of speech, one, because every voter should be able to vote for anybody.
Okay.
But the other thing is that they added it on there, and they're very explicit about this, to limit communists being on the ballot, which is illegal. They're not allowed to say like, oh, we don't like your message, you can't be on the ballot. That's illegal.
Was that part of the preamble of the bill that changed the law to make
That
it?
is. Wait, what?
So
No.
So I have it here.
If you go back into the news of the time,
Right.
Okay.
then you find the Secretary of State making explicit statements like, we are keeping them off the ballot because they're communists.
Georgia, yeah, and I've got it here. It says Georgia bars communist candidates from ballot. This is a ruling in interest of public policy. Secretary of State announces Atlanta, Georgia, August 20th. I don't know exactly what year this is, but it reads, for the first time in Georgia history, communists seeking public office will be barred in the November general election from having their names placed on the ballot. Secretary of State John B. Wilson, who has made the ruling, said it would be against public policy to place on our ballot the names of candidates of a party which seeks to overthrow our democratic constitution from form of government. He explained he acted on the advice of Attorney General Ellis Arnall. Governor E.D. Rivers concurred with the actions. So this goes back. I mean, there's a write up here, and this first part I think probably shed a little bit more light on it. The Georgia ballot access laws were tightened after the Communist Party attempted to register their candidate for the president on the ballot in 1940. At the time, appearing on the Georgia ballot was simply filling out the form. The Communist Party placed its presidential candidates on the Georgia ballot in 1928, 1932, and 1936 with no problem. That's crazy.
So it would, so we all like abhor the ideas of communism, right?
Yeah, don't vote for them.
But wouldn't it even be better? Like, you could even argue to Republicans, hey, if the communists have their own party, they won't infiltrate their Democrat party, and then
it's the whole
they split the vote. Like,
it's suppression again.
They talk about splitting votes all the time. It's like, oh, you libertarians are just splitting the vote, and we agree with you guys. That's literally a counter argument. Like, hey, don't you want to split the Democrat vote?
Yeah.
Give them their communist party.
It happens all the time, and we talk about it today where, you have social media driving voices underground, right? Where now what's going to have to happen is they're going to have to infiltrate other parties.
Yeah. And then pops up AOC.
Yeah, and all of a sudden now we've got a Democrat Party that is so far communist that you might as well just have a communist party. And you've got Republicans who are really, Democrats out there, and you've got no voice for anybody in terms of liberty.
Right.
It's the fact that this was the standard up until 1940. All they had to do was go and put their name on a ballot. Think about how that has changed. In the face of communism, people got scared, and so they outlawed something without thinking through the repercussions of their implied force. And now, I'll tell you right now, that's one of those things that is absolutely destroying this entire nation, is trying to suppress voices out there. Let them be heard. For who they are. Let them be heard, whether it's completely communism or it's complete anarchism. Either way, I want to know who they are. I want to know where they stand, and I want them to have ballot access, because I think that way you're not doing exactly what you alluded to, is suppressing those guys and making them infiltrate into different groups where really their principles aren't ascribed.
It's the problem with making decisions based on kind of just what's right in front of your face, instead of doing it on a principle stance, which means you could predict the future consequences. The same boogeyman, the communist, is the reason why they justified proxy wars in Honduras and in South America and Vietnam. Yeah, which has come back to bite us. Things that matter to like conservative Republicans, a lot of the unrest in Latin America is because we propped up dictators,
Syria,
and that's why there's legal immigration.
Egypt, Lebanon. The entire Middle East, for God's sakes. We're living an example. And now you look at Venezuela, and we're sitting there going, "Oh, here we go again, guys!"
But now you're explaining, so you're losing, right? Let's just make a law to stop immigration. Let's just do it. That'll end it right there.
It is definitely complicated not to go into the weeds, because it's like, hey, I actually have this framework here that I can use to predict what will happen in 100 years or 200 years.
It's happened over and over and
like
over.
It's going to happen
history.
again. You're making the same mistake.
Yeah.
But I agree that we go into too much explaining often. So now back to the bill, HB 191, which I find there's a few interesting tidbits of information there. The fact that it's been introduced, the same type of bill, for a few years now, right?
Yeah. Yeah, typically it's a Republican that introduces it, actually. But when we went back to those Republicans to say, hey, are you willing to sponsor this bill again? They were, I guess they got their wrist slapped or something, but they were not willing to do it anymore. And none of them were even willing to sign on to it anymore. But we did find a Democrat to carry it, and then we found basically a total of 3 Democrats to sponsor it and 3 Republicans to sponsor it. So it's a I call it a pan-partisan bill.
So have you
pan-partisan? Interesting.
Yeah, because it's like everyone. So and independents agree with it, and everyone agrees with it, right? So
how
they should.
Yeah. How are you guys working? Like you said, like a pan type situation. Are you guys working with anybody and everybody that you can on trying to get this passed from different organizations out there that might be communist?
We have tried. The Green Party got involved a little bit. They tried to do some amendment stuff to it, and I was like, let's just keep it simple right now.
What did so the bill itself changed it? The former bill that was introduced by Michael Caldwell most of the time said that it would be down to 2%, right?
You know what? I don't know the history of those bills.
I'm pretty sure
they exist.
It's 1 or 2%.
Now McCoon did one the last session that was just end it. It was just
Really?
it just got rid of it, but he was the only sponsor, and it never saw the light of day. But it was literally just it was no additional language. It was just crossouts, which is awesome. I love those laws.
We missed
So
some
much
of those.
credit to McCune, but he
Yeah.
does stuff like don't like at all. But then he does like the perfect stuff.
Oh, yeah.
as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
But now the bill was introduced this year by Dashawn Kendrick,
Yep.
who's a Democrat.
Yep.
And she made it better than the Republican version, which was to take it down from 5 to 1 or 2%, and she just put it to 200.
200
signatures.
max. So it's still the percentages are still the same. What we did was we made it, instead of registered active voters, we just said people who voted in the last election, because the voter turnout is way less than registered voters, right? So that makes it make a lot more sense for us. And it maxes that at 200. So
Yeah.
for most races in Georgia, it effectively makes it 200 signatures, which is totally doable. It shouldn't be there, but it's doable.
Yeah, I wonder what races would be under 200.
Maybe a county commission. That's the closest. If there's a city council that's partisan, it'd probably be that. I mean,
That's funny.
Yeah, I'm not sure which ones those are though.
I'd love it to be out there like one that needs like 10 signatures.
yeah.
He asked his family just to sign.
I just think
He or she.
the ability to run for office, I think, is one of those benefits of being a citizen of this country. It's not a right. You don't have a right to run. Obviously, when we
Well, yeah,
talk
because rights don't exist with an arbitrary structure.
should be
exactly,
able to.
but a benefit, right? Like the benefit of a speedy trial is one of those things. The benefit of having the benefit of a vote. It's you don't have a right to vote in America. You don't have a right to run. You have a benefit as a citizen within the construct of the fiction that is government to run.
Yeah, because if you don't have that benefit within the system or within that system, you could call it a right almost. But I think that's problematic.
we're not
you say,
equal.
then the system doesn't work.
Well, and part of freedom of speech is that every voter should have a right to vote for whomever they want to vote
Right.
for. And
If they don't find that person,
right.
they should be able to be that person.
And actually, the funny thing is in Georgia, if you want to be a write-in candidate, you have to qualify for that too. So you have to go pay and,
Sure.
and do some stuff anyway. If I just said, if I started a write-in campaign and did not qualify and I got 51% of the vote, I still wouldn't win. They wouldn't count any votes for me because I didn't qualify.
So when you say qualify, you have to pay that same amount?
Pretty sure you have to pay, yeah.
Golly, it's crazy.
They have a pauper's affidavit, is what they call it.
Yeah.
So you can't pay it, but you got to go get the signatures if you can't pay it.
But the pauper's affidavit, I don't know the details of it, but I've seen it a few times, and you have to prove that you have like no money.
Yeah.
And so
You have to be like
sometimes
homeless.
sometimes you have money, but like it's like I don't want to sell my car to run for
Right.
Congress.
yeah.
You shouldn't
And
have
like
to.
I don't want to like liquidate my 401k to do that, so
And it's subjective to whomever is making the determination at the time.
yeah, I find that it's the same thing with your right to a lawyer. Like you'll have a publicly appointed lawyer.
Yeah.
But if you say you can't pay for it, and it's the same that weird determination. Like, well,
I can't.
who's to say what I can or can't
Yeah.
pay for? Like, yeah, again, you want me to sell my car? You want me to
Yeah.
like these savings are for my retirement? Like, how are you supposed to make that
Yeah,
argument?
you're making a quality judgment about my lifestyle, and that's not fair.
It's crazy. I am so glad that you brought this to the show today. I had no idea the origins of why this passed here in Georgia in the first place.
Yeah.
That
A lot of people are actually that's when people start getting interested. You start talking about percentages and numbers and blah blah blah, and people are like, "Oof," eyes
Yeah.
glaze over. And then you talk about like, well, here's this newspaper clipping from the 1940s, and people are like, "Oh, that's cool."
they just arbitrarily at the time used communists as the boogeyman to say we can't allow this, and it is crippled
Yep.
the American electoral system ever since.
Yep.
Even if you're a Republican, like a diehard, and there's categorical things that you do not agree with libertarians.
Good, vote against them.
Yeah, I don't have to
You
agree
should
with
want the libertarians to be there because I think you can objectively argue that the libertarians make the Republican Party better.
Oh, they have to. Do you know how far left right now the Republicans would be without having libertarians call them to the carpet?
Yeah, absolutely.
I-
And it's actually something that libertarians and people in general don't understand necessarily in politics is the people who are not part of the duopoly. Like there are upsides to the fact that there's a duopoly. The people in the middle who, at least theoretically, might be swing votes or every so often like switch. Like there's a Ron Paul candidate, they go towards that.
Sure.
There's a Tulsi Gabbard, they go towards that. They actually have an inordinate amount of power because they are that swing vote. The person who always votes Republican, the Republicans in the general election don't care about them because they always vote Republican. They have nothing to gain there.
And that's the thing is there's no motivation for them to do anything. If it's Democrat versus Republican, they're just going to go in there and vote Republican down the line.
It's a singular reason, or like the biggest reason why I think the Republicans talk about the Fed and talk about war and so forth, especially in the last like decade probably, is because, well, that's something that the smaller L libertarians care about and what the big L libertarians care about. And Ron Paul and candidates before him to some degree brought that in there as something that mattered.
And you can win us at the top of the ticket anyway. I mean, if you look at the top of the ticket on the way down, if you look at Georgia specifically last year, right, we had a really heated gubernatorial race, and if you look at the top of the ticket, the Libertarian got 0.95% of the vote.
I was one of those.
Pretty low, but thank you.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I don't have any trouble saying that. I knew Brian Kemp was full of it, man.
Yeah,
and I'm obviously not voting for Stacey Abrams, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
And we actually had Ted on the show, and Ted's ability to talk to issues, I mean, he understands liberty.
He's so smart. He's like too smart to talk to regular human beings.
And that's the thing is,
he definitely goes into that like the weeds of explaining things.
I love it. I love the fact that he can do that and pull it from from memory and teach.
Oh yeah,
right. Like that's the one thing that and I know you kind of have this thing where, like, if we're explaining, then we're losing, right? Maybe I have to rethink things because I like to teach.
I think it's the baby bird thing. You have to teach like the basics.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't teach, I don't know,
the history of
the
money,
broken window fallacy. Even though that's a pretty easy one to understand, you should just make the most populist argument that's within the liberty confines. Like, hey, are you better at spending your money, or is the government better at spending your money? Like that's an argument that is, I think, like anybody can take in pretty easily, especially if it's from somebody who's charismatic, who has like leadership qualities. I think that's why you got the percentage you did in your race. It's not because necessarily they saw like all the writing on the wall of just how bad Rob Woodall was. It's because you had command and you gave them like the entry level drug.
Yeah, first one's free.
So he got 0.95% on down the ticket. I was running for Public Service Commission, which no one really knows what they do. I got 2.67% of the vote, right? I got substantially more. And I think it's because people just didn't feel safe at the top. But what Ted was talking about in his debate, and he got made fun of in the media for it, was hemp. He talked about industrial hemp over and over and over again as a silver bullet for many different problems that they were bringing up. And he's not wrong. But now you look at it, and we can argue about the hemp bill that just got passed because it's actually a pretty terrible bill, but it got passed.
A step.
We got a hemp bill passed right after. So why did they make fun of him for that? He was the only one talking about it, and now it's a law, right? Now we've I hate to use the word allow, right? But we allow it now.
Well,
our captures have allowed it.
You forced them.
They have ceased to stop us.
Yeah.
As long as we follow a lot of rules.
They know they no longer feel it safe. So between them, they said, "Hey guys, if we continue to prohibit this the way we're prohibiting this, we're not going to be in office any longer."
Well, you only have to give up your Fourth Amendment rights and allow flyovers and
give them a bunch of money.
Give them a bunch of money. It's
$100,000 for the big one.
That's the starting bid, though. I believe it's an auction type system.
Oh, let me tell you, the DNR right now, in terms of private land, you don't have to consent to flyovers. They do them anyway.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I've been out hunting on private land and had a low DNR plane, probably, I don't know, 200 to 300 feet somewhere, go, nice and slow, single engine, yellow plane, right over top.
That's our money paying for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they can go violate our rights.
Taking the guys that are the greatest conservatives in the nation. Yeah, I say conservatives. That's not the right word.
Capital C. It's probably fine.
We are conservationists. The greatest conservationists that are out there, the hunters, that have done more for protecting, wildlife and setting up reestablished type populations and all that kind of stuff. They're out there still trying to bust those people for being really good people. It's crazy to me.
Oh, you're talking about flyovers for like poaching, like checking for poaching?
Oh no, I'm talking like flyovers. If you're out even on private land and you have, you're in the wrong zone and you've got feed on the ground or something like corn or something like that. And instead of
flyovers for that,
dude, yeah, and if they if they catch you doing that
It's
kind of
worse
stuff,
than you thought, right?
They're gonna take all
always
your
worse.
stuff. They're gonna take all your guns.
I heard of the flyovers for looking for cannabis plants.
Yeah, they do
Right,
that
so
too.
I've seen that, which is also just not.
Yeah, and heads up to
violating the
those
Fourth Amendment.
people who are home growers out there. They do it through spectral analysis.
Right.
So it's not just when I say talk spectral analysis, it's not just do you have a warm place in your house? If you do, that's probably a dead giveaway. But the spectral analysis out there are certain types of light that reflect differently off of different substances. And so you can fine-tune cameras in terms of bandwidths to identify and pick up that reflection. And so if they fly over an area, which they can do in large swaths at high heights these days, they can sit there and go bingo, bingo, bingo. Like that's the way that works.
Mm-hmm.
They do that in England. They have vans that go through the streets to see if people have TVs and if they've paid their TV tax.
What?
Yeah, there's a TV tax. In France, too, you have to pay, I think it's like
Every year?
65 euros a year for your TV or something.
For each TV?
I don't know if it's each TV.
Just for the privilege of having a communication piece on your wall. Wow.
Well, I mean, in Georgia, they just tried to pass that Netflix tax to
Yeah.
redistribute the wealth, essentially, because they wanted to take all that money from people in Atlanta paying for Netflix and give it to rural areas for their broadband.
Sure, yeah. I mean, Comcast is missing out again, and a lot of the the Cox organization and family that's here in Georgia that kind of spearheads a lot of that. I mean, that's kind of a big deal. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder how that got started.
The whole system, I know the PSC is above how the internet companies and ISPs operate, right?
Yeah.
It's mostly power is mostly where they get in the news, but
Okay.
yeah. It's landlines. But
I
it's
don't
not
really
internet.
even understand. I just know that at certain spots you can only get one ISP, and it seems like it's been like grid out as if there were gangs, and each like gang gets a little territory.
Yeah.
I just know it annoys me because all the ESPs suck, especially Comcast.
Yeah.
Well, they suck because they typically do not compete in their own market. Some of the things are getting a little bit better, but I think the law is basically, and I think it's a federal thing, that they carve out and they say like in this territory you can offer this type of internet, but it's like so if you offer like Comcast does cable internet. Mm-hmm. So if you offer cable internet, there's not another cable internet, but AT&T does something else, right?
The DSL.
They'll do the DSL, and so they can offer that. And so there's no competition within the type, but so you have some options, but not a ton. It's still limiting. And so when people ask me so I got asked about rural broadband all the time when I was running for office, because that's a big deal in Georgia right now.
Yeah.
And I wanted so badly to roll my eyes every single time they ask me that question, because I'm like it has nothing to do with me. I should have zero say in anything that has to do with what you're asking. So but the answer was to figure out what laws are blocking people from going into rural areas and get rid of those laws, right? I mean,
in some ways there's not, but it's like if you're somewhere that's too far away for somebody to be able to make a profit off of you to furnish you internet, maybe you just shouldn't have internet.
Yeah.
And that's just life. Yeah. And you have other advantages. Maybe the fact that you have a nice view and no neighbors.
Freedom. You can hunt and do things that most people can't do. You don't have to deal with all that nonsense, the crazy world out there.
It makes me angry because it pits people against each other, because I'm like, no, if there's a rural person clamoring for the government to subsidize their internet, which means taking money from me to give them internet.
Wrong.
Like I used to live up in the mountains. It's a beautiful place. Our internet sucked, subpar. But that's not a good reason. Like, if you want better internet, just come closer to Atlanta.
Yeah, it's a sacrifice you're gonna have to make, one way or another.
Sorry, that's a pet peeve.
No, and the assumption was essentially that it's a need, right? People kept talking about the need for broadband too, not even just internet, right? And they're like, well, they need to be able to look for jobs, and I'm like, you can look for jobs on any old internet, and also they don't need to look for. Usually, these people are working; they own their own companies, right? They're farmers, they're whatever, like they're handymen, they're all. I mean, they were making a living before the internet. Why do they need the internet to make a living now? But broadband is for like gaming and Netflix and stuff. I mean, you don't need broadband to find a job. Like,
There's also books.
doesn't make any sense.
for God's
But
sakes.
it's the reason
There's also books. That's true.
the reason they're using it is they probably don't need a poll, but they might have done a poll. It's like, what's the most populous idea that everybody cares about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Internet.
It's that.
Like, I get annoyed with my internet is 1 second slower, right?
Yeah.
Everybody does. That's just human nature.
We're spoiled.
And so it's just the most populist idea. Trump is very good at campaigning because he taps into the populist ideas. I mean, he's a genius in that sense. So this is just a populist idea that you can tap into, and you can just say, internet. Like, if somebody criticizes Comcast, as much as I'm logical, if it's Stacey Abrams, my brain is going to be like, is going to listen to her for a second and be like, yeah, Comcast sucks, Stacey. You go, girl.
That's too funny. Well, hey, we're at about an hour and 34 already.
Already?
I know, right? It's been a fun conversation, and I know you've got a big day ahead of you.
Yeah.
You probably need to get out of here, and it's 10:55 right
Drive
now.
to that other country inside the perimeter.
That's right. Yeah, hope you have your
Hours
passport
away.
ready to
Yeah.
go.
Before we go, anything more about the LP you need to share with people? Events, opportunities, plans in the future?
Yeah, I mean, so the thing is we're looking for candidates right now to run for office all over the state. We have statewide ballot access, so that's 2 PSC seats that are up, and the Senate seat that's up for. People are started reaching out to me about Senate, but not the other ones. And then every single General Assembly seat is up for election every 2 years. So we're looking for people, and we're building up our infrastructure. We're going to need volunteers to go out, and the third prong of our attack for ballot access is just finding people to do it.
Yeah.
It's just, if the law doesn't change, we need to get on the ballot anyway. So we're trying to be the vessel that people can use to get on the ballot. And so if you're looking to get on the ballot, or you're looking to help get somebody on the ballot, please reach out to us. If you want to help out with the lawsuit, our lawyer has graciously offered to work pro bono, which is awesome, but he still has out-of-pocket fees, and we still owe him about $10,000 right now.
Wow.
So and it's funny, it's copies of depositions. It's basically
He's
all the
paid
bills
for this
are.
out of his pocket.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and then
Who is this lawyer? We should give him props.
We have to. Well, we're paying him back, right? Okay. So part of the deal was that we would pay for all out-of-pocket expenses.
Yeah.
So it's basically it's parking and copies of depositions.
Wow.
That's essentially what it is. And copies of depositions vary depending on who's taking the notes, but you're required to buy them, and they're these giant reams of paper, and they charge you like $3 to $5 per page. And yeah, I know
So much government inefficiency.
Seems like a problem there.
I think it's protecting the people who are taking the notes, like keep protecting that job. Is what I kind of delved into a little bit, but because like there's no reason you can't just video it, and then now I have a copy of my deposition, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody's sitting in there for a couple hours, and we think that's one of the strategies that they're using anyway, is that they sat Ted down, they talked to him for like 4 or 5 hours, and it's like,
wow,
you didn't need to talk to him for 5 hours. Like, that doesn't make sense. But it does start to make sense when you consider that like 1 hour is going to cost us, $100-$200, but 5 hours is going to cost us like $1,000.
Is Ted not allowed to bring his phone and just put it on record?
Oh, he does.
Okay.
Doesn't matter if he's allowed or not. You know Ted, right? I mean,
Yeah.
But
he records everything.
I'd even be thinking like if they sat me down for 4 or 5 hours, I'd be like, I'd be weighing the consequences of, well, what if they like get me on some kind of perjury thing because I don't recall correctly?
Yeah. None of that.
Yeah, answer the question and only the question. And yeah.
So what are the websites and the social media or the phone numbers you want for people to contact?
Yeah. So if you want to
easy.
donate or become a member or tell us that you want to volunteer, LP Georgia, that's LP and then spell out Georgia, GEORGIA.com, not .org to my it's a pet peeve of mine.
.com is better marketing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but people don't expect it out of political parties, so.
.com.
But I
better
agree.
marketing.
We're .com. I know. Sorry, I'm just letting out my own pet peeves.
It's fine.
I relate to banks a lot when I'm listening to the podcast because
Yeah.
I have these little things that just bother me, and then I probably
It's
shouldn't
called
even said it
OCD,
out loud, but
obsessive
I just
compulsive.
did anyway.
Yeah, I have to tone down my OCD around
Okay,
banks.
So hold on. I just did lpgeorgia.org. And it went to lpgeorgia.com.
It forwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just tell people it's lpgeorgia.org and you see?
And we can reach out to you there to help with ballot access.
Yes.
That's something I'm extremely interested in now, especially knowing the history.
Yep.
And if I can help through this microphone, memes, whatever I need to do to help stir the pot on this, I'm happy to do so, because I think everybody as a citizen deserves the benefit of putting their name on a ballot when they don't see the person that they want to be represented by, and taking on that challenge.
Cool.
I'd like to ask you a favor too, if
Sure.
you're open to it. So Deshaun Kendrick is the sponsor of HB 191 right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you, since you have a relationship with her, I would imagine, I know her vaguely, but if you'd like to ask her if she'd like to come on the show and talk about that bill,
Yeah.
I think that would be really cool.
Cool.
Thanks.
I will ask her that.
Anything else?
Not that I can think of.
Ryan?
You want to wrap it up on the live?
Yeah, we're just going to do it all right here, man. One-stop shop today.
It was awesome to have you in.
Thank you.
I'm glad you contacted me, because I told Ryan, and we told him in our letter we sent him, like, you've got an open invitation.
Yeah.
But then I never actually made an invitation, so he's like, hey, Banks, how about we have this
Well, it took
invitation?
somebody on Twitter
Oh, that's right.
calling it out, and
Who
I
was
was like,
that?
you know what, I should do
Brent.
this.
It's Brent who did that, not Brent.
Hilburn?
I don't think it was Hilburn. I think it was another
I haven't
Brent.
figured out if that's who that is.
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah.
If it is, that's really cool, and I just put two and two together.
I want to echo Banks, man. It's been a real pleasure to have you in, Ryan, and to get to know you more and sit down in this kind of environment and have long form discussions, which I think we need more of. I hope we get to do it with more people from all over the political spectrum, and I think that it does a tremendous benefit when we sit down. We have common ground, and we start from there, and we capitalize on that. And I mean, we have tons of common ground, obviously. And if I can help whatever it is in terms of ballot access, I'm happy to do so. I mean,
Awesome.
that's not one of those things that was in was in my I guess my sights.
People don't know about it.
And now I think it's probably going to drive me nuts until it's fixed. Like, that's a good thing
good
for
to
me.
hear.
I mean, when I get something that when I get an itch, man, just ask my wife. It's one of those things that gets scratched. So I look forward to having you back on the program
Yeah.
someday.
Well, I want to thank you guys too for having me on and for creating this platform to put people like me and Derek and Ted and all these other people on here, and then like hearing you guys' ideas anyways is just great. So
Well, I appreciate it.
another outlet for liberty.
If you'd like to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/rebellionpod. You can go out there, leave us a 5-star review. We need those reviews. I haven't seen yours on there yet. And
You read it.
Have you?
You
Yeah,
read
yeah,
it.
we
I'm just
read it.
There's a PS. Thanks for talking about Georgia.
I'm just kidding.
Come on. I wrote Ryan G. I didn't put.
Maybe that's what
yeah.
it was.
No, we knew it was Ryan.
Maybe.
We just have so many.
There's so many now.
But it has been there has been a dry spell for the last week.
Yeah.
If you have any comments, criticisms, information, you want another guest on the show, it's info@rebellionpod.com, or on all our social media, we're @rebellionpod. This is your place for peace, liberty, and free markets.
We love you. We need you. Peace.
Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff.